Well, now would be a good time because it's quiet
Yeah.
and we're just ourselves.
Yeah.
Or you could tell
When,
it
when do
another
you
time.
plan to go back to BC?
I'll be leaving Broad Cove on Thursday morning.
Thursday morning?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could do it tomorrow if tomorrow's better.
I think the best time is when I get up early in the morning, you know, and just sit here and
Yeah,
reminisce, you know.
that sounds
So
good.
I'm here early in the morning. So, sometimes between, well, actually, for a long, long time now, I have a date with the Blessed Trinity at 6 o'clock every morning.
Mm.
You know what the Blessed Trinity is? Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
And I have a prayer for each of them individually,
Mm.
and it's directed for you guys, you people, you know.
All our children and grandchildren,
Yeah.
We're lucky.
and now a great grandchild. So, wasn't it very sweet?
Oh my gosh.
That doesn't take long, it only takes about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I just go out there, stand on the veranda with my arms on the banister there, and just look up the clouds. You know, doesn't take any time.
In a place like this, it's not
Pretty close.
difficult to feel
Yeah.
close to God.
It's
Hey.
easy to be close to God here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's happened a long time ago. When I was 4 years old.
What happened when you were 4 years old?
When I was 4 years old, my mother had just given birth to my brother Rupert.
Listen,
You know.
Alan, maybe would you like to record this story too? Okay. Yeah. So Rupert was born.
Well, anyway, I'll give you a quick little story. And my dad was sort of a fellow, he was deep into books all the time. We all have that habit, you know. In one way, it's a nice habit. Another way, it can create problems, you see.
Hmm.
In the case of Dad, he'd think of nothing better than reading a good book, you know, not dirty books or anything like that. It's just history books and so on. So we brought up in history books and history. I knew more about English history, you know, than any of our fellow students in classes, you know. And,
I didn't know that you got that from your father.
yeah.
Huh.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's in the McKinnons.
Hmm.
That's the way they are. Every one of my uncles, you know. And so anyway, how did I?
You were 4 years old.
Oh
Your
yeah,
brother
4
had
years
just
old.
been
Yeah,
born.
okay. Well, he was busy, and Mom, you know, in those days, mothers didn't necessarily go to hospitals. Many of them like to stay at home and have the children, you know. And that was so until a recent generation or two, you know. And so she had Rupert, and day 2, it's on a Sunday, July 24th, 1934. She was in bed resting, and the little baby was with her, little Rupert, and all was quiet. And, you know, at that stage, diapers, you know, it's time to clean the diapers and all that sort of stuff. And we didn't have hot and cold water. We had to make hot water, you see. And the way to do that was through, in that instance, was to take a
Hot plate.
hot plate, you know, and put whatever you're boiling, in this case, it would be a pot of water, you know, a couple of gallons. And this is what he did. He put the hot plate on the table, you know, and in those days the plugs were in the ceiling, you see. So then he plugs the hot plate into the ceiling, you know. But the
Cord.
cord, yeah, the cord was a big extended cord, so it came down over the table and down to the floor and then up the ceiling. And I was a little fellow who had a nice little car, you know, and at that time, with you know, the baby's underwear, so to
Safety
speak,
pins.
you know, there's a lot of what do you call them?
Safety pins.
Safety pins. You know.
Safety.
So I used to put the safety pins together, and I could make a nice big chain, see, and I'd attach it to the back of my car, and I just, you know, I would just crawl along the wall, keep crawling and looking back, and I could make all kinds of figures, you see, with the safety. And this was infatuating. I used to do that, and this is what I was doing. I didn't watch where it's going, and down the hall, I went into the kitchen, and I guess I must have headed for the wires, you know, the hot plate wire, and I got caught up in that, and I pulled the whole goddamn thing down over me. You know, 2 gallons of boiling water, you know, and it was a horrible thing, really. And I wasn't expected to die, but to live after after day 3, you know. And the doctor said, Mrs. McKinnon, you know, I don't think, you know, Alex is going to survive, and I think it's best to take him to the hospital, and we can cut down on his agonies, because it's terrible, you know, make it as comfortable as we can, and see what if he stays home. Well, can he do the same thing at home? Well, if we do our best, well, if he's going to die, he'll die at home, you know. And my mother had a great devotion to St. Joseph. And I was born on the feast of St. Joseph, March 19th, so she always tied me in with St. Joseph, you know. So she took most of her time just talking to St. Joseph, you know, and I was a pretty sick boy.
Yeah.
You know, in day 2 I took 32 convulsions, you know, the second day, and it was horribly burnt, you know. And so the doctor, bless his soul, he was very, very taken with Mom's courage, you know, and said to himself, well, I'm going to try and help as much as I can. So we were on the outskirts of town, and he was down near the waterfront in Halifax, you know, and that's where his office was, and that's where his home was, you know, down on Brunswick Street. And before opening his office, you know, in the morning, and he had a chauffeur. He didn't drive a car. He had a chauffeur. The chauffeur would take him out to my place and work me over for the next hour or so, and then, you know, go back to his office. And then before closing and going home at night, he'd come out again and see how it survived. So he actually, the help of God, saved my life, you know. And his mom, she was playing. Now he was a Protestant, you see, and he was paying close attention to my heart, because the heart is going to be affected by this, you know, and if the heart's affected too well I'm a goner, you know. And he was telling my mother later, he said, you know, the most amazing thing was, no matter how sick Alec was, and he was like a little roast of pork, you know, he said his heart kept keeping a steady mix. He said, never saw that before under those circumstances. Pump, pump, pump. You see, it sounded like a healthy, steady mix, and it shouldn't have been, you know, the mantra that St. Joseph, you know, that St. Joseph. And so I have a strong friendship. I call it, you know, I throw St. Joseph in with the with the rest of the Blessed Trinity, yeah, and Blessed Mother, and I have a great devotion to Blessed Mother, and I have for a long time. You know, I visited Lourdes, where she appeared back in 1858, you know, and there's going to be a big 100th anniversary. And I said, Geraldine, you know, I'd like to make that. And that's over in Lourdes in France, you see. And God left Geraldine. She said, well, why don't you? So she couldn't come because we had infants, you see, we had children. And so I went. And it was very interesting, because there are, you know, there's a story of
excuse me,
of the Blessed Virgin appearing to a very young girl at a certain period of time in 1858, and she appeared only to him, only to her. But, you know, she told her what to expect, and she in turn passed it on to the priests and all this. So the priest didn't believe her, you know, until things start to happen.
I don't know if you remember, on my first communion, you guys gave me a video. It was a cartoon video for kids about Bernadette and what happened at Lourdes, and a silver cross.
Yeah.
Really?
I remember that, yeah. Yeah, so I remember the story about Bernadette and Lourdes.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the story here. We just finished it. And I think this must be, I bought it back a couple of generations ago. And this is the third time I just finished, and Geraldine, she saw it here and she decided she'd read it again. I think you read it once before.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that that's, I mean, I've heard you talk about St. Joseph before, but I didn't know that that's how that started, was because of your mom and because of your birthday.
Yeah.
Huh. And that's funny. I've heard the story about about the burn before, but I didn't catch that. I don't know if I didn't hear that part, or like I didn't catch the part about the hot plate, and like I had in my mind that it was a stove.
Yeah.
Like you pulled something off of a stove, but that's not what happened.
And then, you know, so the big commotion, you know, in the neighborhood. And people were rushing in to see what was happening. And one old lady noticed that there was a gallon of molasses, you know, in the corner. And she thought that if she poured a gallon of molasses on me, that would help diametrically opposite. And it just drove the heat in further,
I know.
just further. So, it's the sort of things we had to contend with.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we, with the help of, you know, the good doctor and my mother, of course, and who else?
Oh, but you were in bed for about 6 months.
I was in bed for 6 months.
Wow.
I had to learn to walk again. I had to learn to do everything again.
Oh
It's
man.
like being born again.
And when you were fussy, what did your mother do?
What's that?
When you were fussy, you know, when you
Oh,
were recovering, and you were still
yes.
fussy.
You asked me, or somebody was asking me if I, you know, if I had any training playing the piano. And I said, no, I'm not really. And I'm not much of a piano player anyway, but, you know, my mother, she used to play, so, you know, we were born and brought up with Scottish music. You know, we moved to Inverness just a few weeks, you know, before I was born. In other words, you know, had they waited for, you know, for 3 weeks and a day, I could say I'm a Cape Bretonner. On the Haliconian, you know. But our house was strictly Inverness, you know. There was still a lot of, my mother spoke Gaelic, and people coming to Halifax from Inverness, I'd say they all spoke Gaelic, if I can remember it correctly, and I could never figure out what they were saying, you know. And Mom and her old lady friends, they'd be hooting in Gaelic, you know, you know, telling stories, you know. I'd like to be able to write a book in what they were talking about. I'm sure we would have won some awards.
I bet.
Yeah.
So,
I bet.
So
anyway,
when you were fussy, your mother would take you on
Yeah.
her lap.
yeah, well, I'd be very, very fussy, of course.
Like 4 years
And-
old,
and-
stuck in bed, I'd
and,
imagine
you know,
so.
from the time I was born, I used to listen to her playing the piano. You know, listen to her and all the melodies and all that sort of stuff. And that's the only thing that would sort of cool me down. She played the piano, and I'd stop, and I'd be forget about all the pain and misery, and listen to the music, you know. And so anyway, that went on, and so after 6 months, I was taught how to walk again, because been in bed for 6 months, you know, and that worked out in time, you know. But it was difficult too for this little fellow, because it was like he was born again, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and for instance, we lived in Broad Cove. You know where Broad Cove is, and but our school was down just 100 yards from the Dingle Tower, and you know we had to take the Dingle Road down to the tower, so we'd have to take the Dingle Road down to you know.
This was when you started
To
school
the
at
school.
6 years old, then.
And
Grade 1.
And my brother and my sister were going there. And, you know, that's where they were going to school. And they were in grades 4. They were in the same grades together. You know, it was grade 4.
Because of their birth dates.
Okay.
So Mom would say, "Now, you gotta stay with Alec, because, you know, there should be somebody with him." And they tried that, but I was I wasn't, you know, I was a very slow walker, and I'd be tying up my brother and sister, you know, and they'd always be concerned with going down the Dingle Road. Alec, we're going to have to leave here. We're going to be late. And they'd see me on the Dingle Road. Do you know where the Dingle Road is? Down there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's only one house on that road at that time. The rest of it were trees.
Wow.
You know? And I remember going down, I'd be the only one on that road. And, you know, when the weather was heavy, the trees would start cracking and spooky.
Mm.
And I'd get spooky as heck, you know.
66 years old.
Poor little guy.
That's
Man.
right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But, you know, we'd all come home when school was in the afternoon. Because we all go to school together.
Mm-hmm.
So we all walk home together. Either that or we'd cut out and play around the Dingle. And the Dingle Tower was, you know, the Dingle Tower was open 24 hours a day in those days.
Hmm.
So, and anybody could go out, kids and everything else. So we'd always run up and down, and that helped a lot, running up those stairs.
Lots of exercise.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd be slow getting up to them, and everybody would be ahead of me. But in good time, year 1 to year 2, year 3, by year 5, I would stay with them. You know.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was.
Build
my
up
life.
those muscles again, hey?
Yeah. So, you know, by the time I got to, when you get to the, when you get in a community like Broad Cove, there's a nice little playground down where the Army had their barracks, and they offered us the use of the playground so that we could play ball there. So, you know, all of my little buddies were all playing ball, and I wasn't playing ball, and one day I decided, well, I'm going to try to play ball. So I learned to play ball, you know, and you know, and I could hit a ball. I had an eye to hit the ball, but I couldn't put it over the fence. I didn't have the strength, you know. And all the other guys could put a ball over. I could never put it over the fence. But I could get on. But I could. By that time, I could walk, and I could learn to run, and I could run the bases. You know, you know what I mean by running the bases. Yeah. And I like that. You know. And so through the years, you know, my legs got strong, but my arm here, you know, this was all that was all burnt, you know, webbed under here. So this was all webbed in, and it grew out webbed in again. So it you know, I only had just part use of my arm because of this webbing, you know. But doctors felt that they couldn't do anything with me until I was fully grown, 21 years of age. You know? And that was accepted, you know. And so when I was 21, we, you know, they cut away all this and I could open and reach up a bit more.
Wow.
You see, that's a long time without full use.
That's a really long time.
You're on, you know.
Yeah,
So-
especially, you know, as a little guy to be.
Yeah, but you know, I
Growing up
used to make do. I wasn't a star hockey player, but made all the teams. You know, I always played defense and hockey, and you know, and through junior high, and I could skate like a whiz, you know. And my older brother said to Mom one day after we'd come from playing, you know, outside hockey up at Chocolate Lake, you know, she said, Mom, you know, Alec's a dynamo. You know, he's a dynamo on his legs. You know, she loved that. She said that was great.
But she never babied him. They say you know, it would have been easy to, at 6 years old, to say, I'm going to keep you home from school. But, and she encouraged you to
That's right.
play ball and all the sports.
Yeah, most of them are contact sports too, you know. Soccer, football, hockey. And when I was 15, I was an amateur boxer, boxer. And we used to entertain the soldiers. We had full use of a military barracks, their gym, and it was a beautiful barracks. And it was located where that
Westmount subdivision?
Is located. You know where the pool is located down?
Centennial
Cottage
Pool.
Inn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was the barracks at that time. And they had a beautiful gym there. And we had the opportunity to use it, you know. So we used it, but for that, we would entertain the soldiers. And Saturday nights, we'd have boxing matches. Now you can imagine, these boys are coming back from overseas, and they've been in the front lines, and, you know, horrible situations. But to hear them, you know, you get in the ring, you start fighting, and they'd be hooting and hollering, and come on, and it was funny. When I'd be introduced, and in this corner, there's Alec and McKinnon, you know, and geez, half the barracks would almost fall in for everybody hooting, because half the numbers of soldiers who were there were from Cape Breton. You know? So they figured, fellow by the name of Alec McKinnon had to be from Cape Breton.
There you go.
Yeah, but
So you would have been, when the war started, Grandpa, you would have been, how old? 13?
9.
9.
I was born in 1930.
Oh, of course. So then how old were you when the war ended?
I was 4 years old when I was burnt.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
I was 5 years
and
old.
I was recovering for a long time.
Yeah.
But it was with Mom's encouragement, you know, and she sort of shooed me on, you know, and she had no objection to my playing sports and so on. I played pretty good sport, but I was not a star, you know, because I had certain handicaps. See. I only had the full use of one arm. And I only had partial use of this arm. See?
Yeah.
So when you got you know, you could hit the ball, you know, and you could place the ball, or the infielder, you know, but you didn't have that strength. You have to have two arms to put that ball over the fence. You see.
Yeah.
No matter if you're Babe Ruth or somebody else. You see. So, but that was fine.
Yeah.
You know, and then I didn't make the high school hockey team. I felt awfully bad about that, but there was a reason for that. You know, when you have a hockey stick, you have to have the use of both arms, and I didn't have the strength of those arms to make a big slap shot, right? I couldn't get a shot away, you know. And if you're playing hockey, you have to be able to shoot a puck, you know, so on. I could skate and hit them in the corners and all that sort of stuff as a defenseman. You have to, you know. So I never made it in high school, but I made it in the leagues outside of high school.
Clouds.
Ready?
No, clouds.
Finished? It's gone?
Don't think so. It's 20 after.
No, it's not gone yet.
Is it? Will we see it come down behind the clouds?
I think so.
We might. Guess we'll find out.
We could sit out on in the couch on the.
I think that's better. I sort of timed that up for it. That's where.
Sure. No, it's coming down. I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Here, Erinn. You sit here,
Yep, coming.
and then Grandpa sit. I'm gonna put a cushion.
Lucky me.
There we go. Kind
You
of nice.
have tea on the stove, Mom?
No, I thought it was turned off.
You want me to make a pot of tea?
No thanks, you can turn it off if it's on.
Okay, all right.
It's nice
Oh,
having
that's
you all to
beautiful.
ourselves.
Oh, it's a bit of a treat for me too. I don't mind sharing too. This is lovely. I don't mind sharing
Well,
too.
I
This is
know,
lovely.
same with us, but... Oh, excuse me. Yeah, well, you'll get to the story.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's a nice.
That's a great story to have too. It's
Yeah.
a pretty important
But
one
to
in his
know-
life, you know.
It's to me, the whole story is strength of her mother, his mother,
Mm-hmm.
because, I mean, lots of other mothers would just,
Why don't I mix the Kahlua for you two?
no thanks.
No, thanks.
No?
I'm
No.
happy with my tea.
Okay.
There we go. I think the sun is going to come down from behind those
Yeah,
clouds.
it has been like it.
Scoot up just a little so I can see.
Yeah.
There we
Okay.
go. Yeah.
All right.
On the cushion, darling, because then you're going to be able to see it.
Yeah, okay.
No, bring the cushion
Oh.
over near you.
Okay.
Over this way, darling. Over this way.
This way?
Because the window pane is this way.
That what you have in mind? Oh, what the hell? There, that should do it. I want to get a little closer.
Well, yeah, but so you're high enough to see the sun.
Grandma.
The sun is going to be down before I sit down.
No, it's gonna.
Okay. All right, there.
There we go.
That it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
There we go.
Yeah, nice and warm.
Yeah.
I hope it pops down from behind those clouds and we actually get
I
to see
think
it.
it will because I don't think the sun has set yet. It's on its way down.
Yeah.
And if not, well, we'll just have to see the rays and.
Ordinarily, we have, clouds that go floating by,
Mm-hmm.
and when the sun is sinking, reflects in the clouds.
Yeah.
It's spectacular.
I'll
But
tell
we're
ya,
not going to
I-
get it tonight because there's no clouds up there.
Yeah.
Not that I can see.
That's so funny given the weather earlier.
Yes.
But I'll tell you, I brag to people about these sunsets.
Well, they are pretty nice.
Oh, they're spectacular.
Yeah.
I was going to say, hey, they're swimming. It's not that. It's the spots in the window.
The waves. Oh,
Water window. Looks
Oh,
like
yeah.
it
The
looks
seal is broken.
like heads.
Mm. Grandpa, I was thinking about your mother the other day. Somebody was talking about World War II, and I was just kind of thinking about some of the stories you've told and about your mother, and I was just trying to imagine like what that must have been like for her during those years, with your dad being away.
Oh,
You talked about my mother?
Well, I
She's-
guess I was wondering about her. I mean, I
I
never
mean,
met her, right?
Okay,
just thinking
yeah,
about her
Yeah, thinking.
and what
yeah.
she went through.
Well,
Yeah.
my mother went through a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
I had great sympathy for Mom.
But she was a strong woman.
She was.
She carried on.
Yeah, she was. And you see, when war was declared, he was in the first war. He was wounded, and he won a medal for bravery, the first war. And he was crazy about the army from the time he was a cadet in high school in Inverness, you know. And he was anxious to get into the army during the First World War. He was too young. He lied about his age, you see, just like my brother Huey did in the Second War.
Oh, wow.
And so...
I didn't know that part.
No.
So he was very young, and he went overseas, and they held him out for a couple of years of the fighting until he was the proper age. And then they put him in there, and he became a machine gunner, and he was wounded just 10 days before the war ended. And, you know, and that wound followed him for the rest of his life. You know, he had a problem with his ability to speech, and we're told that he had one of the highest IQs in the Canadian Army. You know.
Wow.
You know, former officers that were with him during the Second World War, they were now customers of mine when I was in charge of a large building supply business in Halifax. They'd be buying stuff from us, you know, Saturday morning. They'd talk about my dad, you know, and often they'd say, you know, he had the highest intelligence rating in the Canadian Army, you know, but he had a problem. He had a handicap. You see, while he was shooting machine guns at the Germans, they laid down some artillery on him, and the artillery shells blew up and almost took his two legs off. He recovered one of his legs completely. The other leg was with him for the rest of his life. So he had a distinctive
Limp.
Yeah, limp. And not only that, something happened in his brain, and his ability to speak wasn't what it was before before he was wounded.
This was this was in the first war or
in
the
other
second
words,
one?
he had a problem controlling his tongue.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to speak, you know, and sometimes he'd try to get a sentence out and it wouldn't come out, and he'd try and his tongue would come out when he's trying, and it's not pleasant to see, you know. And that poor man had to live with that the rest of his life, you know.
That must have been so frustrating for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Was that injury that must have been from the Second War, hey? Or was that injury in the First War or the second one?
The first war.
The First War.
Yep. But he loved the army so much that when he recovered, he still had a rather heavy limp, you know. But he was able to get around for the rest of his life. And to that respect, life was normal. It's just this way of speaking.
Stutter.
Yeah, that, and so he had to live with that. And so, he got married, and the first two kids were born in Inverness, and the coal mines are giving out, and a lot of the miners were moving out of Inverness, and they're going to Northern Ontario or out to Alberta, wherever there are other mines, So leaving Inverness, and the economy in Inverness was dropping very quickly. So they could see this, and they decided to leave, but they didn't want to leave Nova Scotia, so they decided to come to Halifax. So they came to Halifax, and number 3 came along. So that was me born in
Little
Halifax.
baby Alec.
Yeah. And then there was 3 after me, you know. And so we had a total of 6. And so Dad stayed in the Reserve Army, and he joined the Nova Scotia regiment, and he and that was a machine gun regiment. So he was very, very helpful, you know, the officers, because of his knowledge of machine guns and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So the I think it was September 8th, 1939, war was declared. One day, Dad was leaving for work. The next day, Dad had his uniform on, and we saw saw him very little for the rest of the war, which was almost 6 years. So he's away, and Mom has to raise 6 kids, you see.
So even with his injury, they let him.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's the good
Because
point.
he was very, very intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
and because it was
His training.
his training and his ability to teach
Yes, but
people who,
what about the military,
Not
the
very
medical
stuff.
officer?
and he
Passed.
became a sergeant major, and then a regimental sergeant major, and sergeant major is the go between the officers and the men,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so he's the channel, and he has a lot of responsibility, and he handled that very well, and they wanted to keep him. Now he shouldn't have gone over
Medically.
He was far too old, but he went over and he stayed with his regiment, and they invaded Italy in 1943. That's a year before D-Day. They make big things about D-Day, but the year 1944, when they invaded Normandy in France, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you had Great Britain, you had Canada, the United States. They teamed together and they invaded France, and then pushed Germany out of France and pushed Germany back to Germany, and then put them out of business. You know, they pushed right into Berlin. They looked for Hitler, you know, and Hitler decided he was going to commit suicide. And, you know, when you think of, he was responsible for the murder of so many, particularly Jewish people, tens of thousands of Jewish. He wanted to put the whole race out of business, you know, and he's responsible for that. And so he decided he was going to commit suicide, and that wasn't bad enough. He wanted to take his girlfriend with him, and he did. So he shot himself, and he shot his girlfriend. You know. Anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
So that's what the war was about, and
Yeah.
you know, and you might say he was wounded again in the Second War. We got word that he was ill, and he was supposed to have had, you know, a heart attack, but it wasn't a heart attack.
No, they said it was pneumonia.
Pneumonia. He was supposed to have. when we got word that he was
In the hospital.
in the hospital with pneumonia. And years later, Dad was gone, or well, he when he died, he died of a heart attack.
They did the
the,
autopsy.
Yeah, the doctors that took care of him were also our family doctors, so they had an autopsy on him, And I happened to be visiting the doctor's office when the guy that did the autopsy, he was walking down the hall. We met at the hall, and I knew he had done some work with Dad. And Dad said, "Well, can you tell me anything about the autopsy?" He said, "Well, there was something there that was a little bit peculiar. He was supposed to have had pneumonia."
Checking back on his medical records.
Yeah. And we looked, and the scars on his heart would indicate that he had been wounded again in the Second World War. And
He had a heart attack.
And they didn't want to report that back to us in Halifax, I guess.
Oh wow.
And so, so he said, no, he didn't have pneumonia. With those scars and that on your dad's heart, that was the result of wounds that he got.
Heart attack.
Yeah. On the front, in the fighting front. And he had no business being there, He had every right in the world not to be there. But he chose, to go that direction. So it made it very, very difficult. And then when he came home, and the war was over, we were expecting the same father that left us 6 years before, but he wasn't. 6 years later, and he'd been through a lot, and his temperament was a bit different,
He came back to a 4-year-old son that he had never.
yeah.
Uncle Murray had never met his father.
Wow.
So we see.
So Murray was
He wasn't the same.
conceived
Yeah.
during the war.
Yeah.
Hey?
Huh?
He was born the same day that his father arrived overseas, November 1st, 1942.
42. November 2nd, 1942.
So he was conceived and born during the war. Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't put that together.
So,
Wow.
it was tough.
Yeah.
I know,
The
she's
strength
trying
of that
to
woman.
balance the budget, and he had a check from the government, from the army, monthly, as did all the soldiers, but it wasn't equal to the check that he was getting before
Payment.
when he was working as a civilian before the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had to make do with less, and I could always tell when she was having trouble balancing me, because we'd have to give up a bed for a boarder.
Mm.
So if we'd bring a boarder into her house, and when she paid the bill she wanted to pay, the boarder would go, so we got to know a number of boarders through the course of the war,
Right.
So all of these inconveniences, we're not the only ones. There are hundreds of thousands of families who are going through the whole thing, and even worse, when they came home after what they had been through. You got to realize that they're in the business of killing, and or being killed.
Yeah.
And if you're reading that, if you're you go into that particular office, so to speak, each day, well, it's going to bother you.
Oh yeah, it's bound to.
Yeah,
Hey?
yeah, it changes. So a lot of our boys that came back were just not the people they were before they went over.
They couldn't be.
Oh yeah. So we were victimized, so to speak, in that regard. And so, and we weren't the same when you think about it. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We were 6 years older, and not the same kids that he remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Big
were
difference
11
between a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old.
Right.
So it was a bit crazy mixed up, and
I would imagine for your mom, I mean, 6 years of
So
being on her
separation.
own and making it work and
Yeah,
doing what she had to do to.
and all of a sudden,
Make
Sergeant
ends
Major
meet.
coming.
so they would be picky at each other,
Hmm.
and one day I was in my books studying, and they were having a serious argument, and it wasn't very pleasant. And this is about 3 years after he arrived home, and he's reading my books, and they're having this, it's a real heated argument, and I got away from the table, went in, and I said, for God's sakes, if you don't stop this, you're both going to go straight to hell. And he stopped, and they looked at me, They didn't say anything to me. They didn't slap me around or anything of that nature, But
They realized.
they cooled down, and they lessened the bickering from that point on.
Realized what
They realized that the damage
Effect.
that they were doing, to the kids. So that's the way we lived through, and it wasn't easy. I wanted to, well, Dad was overseas, and then my brother decided he's going to join the Air Force, so we lied about his age, and he got into the Air Force, and he was ready to go overseas to fly airplanes, and he's going to drop bombs over Berlin, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so they gave the boys in his position a week off before going overseas. So he took the week and came home to be with the family, So, yeah. Alec, how's school? I said, oh, not too good. What do you mean not too good? I said, well, I think I'm going to flunk this year. Why? He said, well, I'm not making good marks in school. I said, why? I said, well, I don't know. Yeah, I have friends who are not going to school now. They've been taken out of school and they're working. This is during the war, when there was a tremendous shortage of manpower. See, because of all the people going into service. See,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and there's a lot of mandate because of the war. They had to be ready for the ships that were coming in. They're wounded ships that were by German submarines and all this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of that in Halifax,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we, I don't know, anyway, you got the picture.
Yeah. You were saying about school.
Oh yeah, the school. So, he said, Ellie, why aren't you? I said, well, I have friends, They're not going to school now. The parents didn't mind them getting out of school, and they're down working the shipyard, sweeping now, and they're making money. I'm not making money. And, you know, I think I could do the same thing. You know, oh, Alec, you can't do it. You've got to have your
Grade
education.
7.
You know, you're going to break your mother's heart. And it's, well, okay. So what are you going to do? Well, I guess I'm going to have to hit the books again and see if I didn't think I was going to grade. But, you know, it was then April. And I think if I hit the books, maybe I can catch up before the last exams. He said, will you promise to do that? I said, well, sure, Huey. I idolized my older brother. Huey, I promise you. So I did. And I graded, you know. And the big thing for me was the following year was the teacher. She was a teacher, a member of the Sisters of Charity, and she was from Boston, you know. And when, you know, when the first day of school, you know, the register's always called.
Roll
and when
call.
the teacher is trying to identify the name with the face, you see.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
With the face of the student. So, Alexander McKinnon. I thought for a minute and paused. She said, Alexander McKinnon as present. She looked up and she saw me. And after school, we were leaving the class, and I made it a point to be the last student leaving. I said, sister, if you don't mind, my name is Alexander, but I've never been called that. You know, everybody, including my parents, call me Alec. And so, would you mind calling me Alec? And she said, by all means, Alec. She had a grin on her face, you know. And I kind of like that. And I kind of like, you know, what was happening. It was sort of something between she and me.
Chemicals.
Yeah.
Good chemical
Yeah, I
reaction.
had a hard time with the previous teacher, previous year's teacher. I don't blame the teacher because I wasn't being fair. I was playing hooky and all that sort of stuff.
Makes a big difference, though. Hey, having a teacher who you really click with.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I liked her style, you know. I liked the way she was teaching. And so I got into the books. And the following year, I got into the books. And we had 2 packages of students. We had girl students and boy students in our class, a big class. And we had a whole bunch of girl students who were very, very clever, and fewer boys, but nonetheless there were some that were pretty sharp, you know. And so I hit the books. And when school was finished, I ended up with the sharp boys, you know. I graded with honors, you know. So it was all because the attention that I got from the sister. And we remained friends for the rest of our lives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And when I got married, I used to take the kids out. She was the sister from Mount St. Vincent. And we'd take them out on a Sunday and spend a little time with, not every Sunday, but
Occasionally.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Occasions.
Yeah.
We take the kids out to visit her.
What was her name?
And then when she retired,
What was her name, Alec?
Sister Rita Mary. Sister
I
Rita
heard you
Mary.
talk about her before.
Yeah.
Sister Rita Mary.
And when she retired, she
Where did you go to high school in Halifax?
No, you heard. She
No,
heard you
sure.
talk about her.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But when she retired, she moved back to Boston. And when we go down to visit Catherine and Alex, we would go and visit her.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, she saved the day for me, really, and Huey. And so.
Well, I think we missed the sunset.
Yep.
I think we did too.
Yeah.
Still beautiful, though.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll have to get at how we got together.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll get up early because I'm gonna meet Emily and Alexia to go kayaking at 10.
Yes.
But I'll just make sure that I'm up early enough that,
I can tell you right now, a half an hour.
Sure.
yeah, if you feel like it,
Okay?
now that you're on a roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now. Start right now. I was, at that time, I was a commercial traveler. And I was selling chocolate. I was a representative for a chocolate firm. And that chocolate firm manufactured coffee crisp and Macintosh toffees and all very, very popular, And I got that job with them because they asked me to join their firm. And they stole me, if you will. And the firm I was working for was Red Rose Tea. And, selling Red Rose Tea in Cape Breton. And did a pretty good job. And they heard about the job I was doing. And they stole me away from what was the first one?
Red Rose Tea.
Red Rose
Round
Tea.
trees.
Yeah.
They poached ya.
Yep. So anyway, do you remember the cave in at Spring Hill? The miners?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Well, during that period, I just happened to be in the area, and I got a call from Toronto, and it was a fellow who was general manager of Eastern Canada for Canadian Johns Manville. They were manufacturers of roofing materials and various other materials that go into a house, And they, to make the long story short, they had heard about me, and they wanted to see me. And the guy wanted to come down from Toronto and have a meeting with me. And I said, look, I'm going to be away this week, but I'll be in Spring Hill at such a time. So he got in touch with me in Spring Hill, and he came down to see me from Toronto in Halifax, and we had a meeting. He said, if you don't mind me asking, how many chocolate bars would you sell around here? When I told him, it almost fell off his chair. He couldn't believe it, and because I had a very, very extensive market, and we were very successful. I believed getting up early in the morning and working a full day, and I'd steal a bit of my private time, to be the last one to leave my particular territory. I might be in Amherst, living in Sydney. I should have left at noon, Amherst at noon, and I'll start back to Sydney back. But I'd never do that. I stopped working in Amherst at supper time. I had supper time and then head back to Sydney. And so I was putting a lot of extra time in the business, and it became very, very successful. And so anytime somebody chased me, it's because they heard of, obviously, the successful I was doing in the industry, So that sounds a little arrogant, but it isn't. That's the way it was. And so I get a call from this guy, Canadian John Manville. So he came down, interviewed me, and he offered me something. I had planned to make the rest of my life with the chocolate work company.
Round trees.
Because they treated me very, very well. And but they made me an offer, and she said I couldn't say no to, And so I accepted it. Canadian John Manville. They said, well, you're going to have to come to Montreal here. you're going to have to learn something about the products that we manufacture. I said, well, I don't have a problem with that. That shouldn't be a problem. So I said, well, we'll give you a date. So they gave me a date. It's in the wintertime. And in Montreal, cold wintertime, you know. So we went up there by plane, and they set me up in a hotel in downtown Montreal, and I was there to be there at the office for 3 weeks, and they had trained me as to what the materials were all about that they were selling, you know, and so I decided the first morning. I said, well, I'm going to go over there early and park myself in front of the door, the employees coming in. I just want to see what's happening there. So we didn't, you know, paraded. It was a big office, or I don't know. I mean, how many people in that office do you think, Jerry?
Oh, I imagine there must have been 30 or 40 people anyway.
You know, at least, yeah. It's a big office. So they came in one by one, you know, girls and the men, some old, some young, some the knockouts, very, very handsome men and beautiful girls. And one girl went by, and I looked at her twice. You know, there's something about this girl, you know, whatever. And then again, I looked at her, and so then I'm given a desk. I'm sharing a desk with one of the young clerks, and he's showing me the whys and the wherefores of the business, and I noticed that this gal I noticed in particular seemed to be a rather important gal, because she was, you know, she always seemed to have, you know, going from desk to desk, so to speak, and on the occasion going in to spend time with the manager of the whole operation, and he was manager for all of Eastern Canada, you know, which is a big job. And apparently he was depending a lot upon this particular girl for something or other. And who's that gal anyway? And that's Geraldine Ellis. She's from the Gaston Coast. Is that right? So, you know, they had a bowling club, and they used to meet every Wednesday night to bowl. And there I am down at the hotel, and I'm just twiddling my thumbs, and, you know, maybe sit in the lobby and read something, and then go to bed. They get up early in the morning and go to the office, and so anyway, I noticed her when she was bowling. She's a terrific bowler. My God, she's got a lot going for her. You know? And I'm not much of a bowler. So anyway, I said, well, it's a nice little girl. And then I returned to Halifax and got busy, and, you know, selling materials. And incidentally, I got going right away, and I was an immediate success. And they couldn't believe the amount of materials that were coming in, you know. Well, that's another thing that I was, you know, that I was selling. And so I was, I think it was the president of Johns Manville. They're the parent company. You see, Canadian Johns Manville is a subsidiary of the American Johns Manville. You know, the American Johns Manville were in the top 10 manufacturers in the United States, which is big. And so So the president was coming to address the sales representatives, and all of the sales representatives were, asked to come to Montreal for the meeting. So I went in, and I said, "Where's Geraldine Ellis?" "Oh, she left." She said, "What?" "Yes, she left." Yep. She always wanted to be an airline stewardess, and she couldn't be because at that time, the war hadn't been over very long, but the stewardesses up to that point in time had to be nurses, you see, and so that disqualified Geraldine, you see, but that changed. And Geraldine was one of the first applicants after the change, and she got a job, She became an airline stewardess. And so, well, wasn't that something? So.
I didn't catch that part about the nursing before.
Yeah.
Huh, there you go.
All airlines require, you have to be a registered nurse. You have to have your RN. But then most of the airlines, except for TransCanada Airlines, took off that RN requirement during the war, because they needed nurses during the war. But TransCanada Airlines kept that regulation in until 1955. So that's when I went down. I saw a notice in the paper, and I went down, interviewed with TransCanada Airlines. So I was in the first class after they took off the RN requirement.
Yeah, you were. So that Geraldine Ellis wasn't there any longer. She went off to go be an airline stewardess.
Well, I went up there with a guy who worked with similar work as mine with John Smamble, and we'd gone to high school. We played hockey together, His name was Bill Flynn. So he was called up as well as me. I didn't go up with him, but we had planned to return to Halifax together, and just as, sit in the same seats, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so we got aboard the plane, returned to Halifax, and Billy was a bit of an excitable guy, and so I was settling down, I was reaching for a magazine, and all of a sudden I get an elbow in my rib, and he swerved. He broke a rib. I wasn't amused. I said, "Are you crazy? What the hell's wrong with you?" And he was awfully excited. And then he pointed up to where the airline stewardess was about to make an announcements, that they make from an aircraft before they take off. And he said, "Look. Now, look, who should be there but Geraldine Ellis."
I was working my first flight.
That was your first flight?
My first flight.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well,
we should make a movie of this.
Well, we both were some glad to see her, because she was wild thought of at the office.
I was so happy.
And while she was there, she everybody liked her, and so they were sorry to see her go. But now we're on our flight back to Halifax, and she sees us, and she's passing our seat, and we trip her. No, we didn't. But she knew in no uncertain terms that we were in the plane, and so did the passengers. Because she spent most of the time with her talking to us, and
giving good service.
So anyway, that was fine. And we're getting off the plane, and she was continuing on that to Boston or
Newfoundland.
Newfoundland.
My first flight was Halifax to Newfoundland.
Yeah. And so I was getting off, and I had a card.
Business card.
Yeah, business card. And I passed it to her. And she just looked at it, and she just passed it back to me.
I was going to see the world first.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, says hi to myself. You know, well, I tried, and, you know, and that was the end of it. You know, but we're all, you know, impressed with Geraldine all around. She was a nice looking girl, and she was a nice girl. You know, there's one time, one of her associates, this fresh guy, in not our office but another office, try to get smart with
Yeah,
her.
but you're getting away from the story there.
Trying to get smart with her,
Uh-oh.
and she gave her a slap on the face that almost took his head off.
Back of my face.
You know, and that's the story that got around. You know, so people
Proper
do.
thing.
Before his sexual harassment, you handled it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the story got around. Alec, very attractive girl. she's, you know, she doesn't take anything off of guys.
She has excellent
Out of
boundaries.
place, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And they like that, you know, and so on. Oh, and you know, the months go by. There I am, a brand new representative of a company that's selling roofing materials and
A year later.
other materials for floors and sidings of a house and buildings and all that stuff. And we get a call that some materials we supplied to the largest
Shopping center.
shopping center. Thanks.
Dartmouth Shopping Center was the largest east of Montreal
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
in 1950.
And the water was coming through the roof, and she was, it's pretty serious. So I called our boss and you know, explained what the situation was. She says, well, I'm gonna get it here. I'm gonna get a hold of our representative for architects, and we'll send him down the next aircraft to Halifax. Maybe you could meet him at the airport and take him out to the you know, shopping center and work with him. You'll be up on the roof, and we'll be looking the roof over. And so I did that. So we're up on the roof, and we're just looking for the problems in the roof where the leakings were. And all of a sudden he said, it's too bad about Geraldine. I said, Geraldine who? Geraldine Nellis. I said, well, what happened to Geraldine Nellis? You didn't hear? I said, no, I didn't hear. What's the problem? She said, well, yeah, it's quite a story there. She said, you know how Quebecers are about celebration anniversaries, you know, priesthood's anniversaries. So while he was there, ready to celebrate his 25th anniversary as a priest. And so her immediate family were all going to get together and have a party in his honor. And that was all arranged, and so they were going to meet back home and such and such a date. And so they left, whole bunch left from Quebec.
Carload.
In a carload, and 3 or 4 in that car, including her oldest brother, and his name was Alec Nellis. And they headed out on an early morning for Quebec, and they're just 3 or 4 miles from leaving Quebec, and there's an oncoming tractor trailer. And the fellow had been made to drive for 3 days, and he was falling asleep at the wheel. And he was going fast, and he drove right smack in front, right onto the oncoming car, which was theirs. And all of them in their car were killed.
All 6.
All of them. There were 6 or 7 in the car, and Geraldine's oldest brother was the chauffeur of the car. He was killed, and 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 a sister who was a nun, and she was killed, and 2 aunts, was it,
Yeah.
that were nuns, and they were killed. And see, they all grouped together at Quebec, and then used his, you know, and he lived in Quebec,
Gaspé.
and so they used his car. They're going to use his car and pack it full of people and head off and join the party. And so it was a real sad situation. So that night when I was feeling bad for her, and that night when I was writing the my reports to the head office, when I finished, I just scribbled off a note, and I didn't know where she was. I just said,
Stewardess.
"What's that?"
Stewardess. Geraldine
Stewardess Geraldine Nells, the airport in Montreal.
Trans-Canada Airlines.
Trans-Canada
Dorval.
Airlines. And I said, "Well, it's nice to get her, you know, maybe not, but she got it." And so the next time she's flying into Halifax, she phoned to thank me for the letter. And I wasn't there. I was down in Yarmouth, way down in Yarmouth. I was rode on a week of traveling, the side of Halifax, you know, from customer to customer. So I got home, and but anyway, she phoned. I wasn't there. But the next time she phoned, I was home. So that's when it all started. I said, "What are you doing for supper tonight?" She could have had supper with her fellow
Crew members.
pilots and all that at the airport or at the hotel.
The Lord Nelson.
But we had supper together, and then we started to date after that. So there's the story. Are you still awake?
I mean, it's such an epic story. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, all of those pieces, right?
Yeah,
For
I know.
everything to come together like
Yeah.
that.
But actually, I'll finish what Alex started. So all the salesmen came up to Montreal for an annual sales meeting in January, because that's the slow time of the year for salesmen in roofing. So when he came down, he called to see if we would, myself and maybe some other stewardess would come down and meet in the lounge at the Laurentian Hotel. And it just happened that weekend, one of the girls there was a wedding in the party, so we were 4 or 5 girls. So I checked with them and we said, "Yeah, we'll come down." And I said, "We're also going to come back by ourselves. We're going down by taxi." And so we had the stories, those salesman stories, and Alex in particular was so funny. We laughed all evening. And it was time to leave the Laurentian Hotel to come back, and he comes out and he wanted to take me home. So this other salesman said, "Now you know what the deal was. You're not going." But he had been sharing a room with this Cyril Martel, who had gone to bed earlier, and when he got up to the room, the Cyril was sound asleep, and he grabs him by the ankle, pulls him out of bed, and so Cyril said, "Are you crazy or something? What's wrong?" He said, "I met the girl that I'm going to marry." So the next night, Alec asked me on a date, just he and I. And I was working 2 flights to New York that next day, and I thought, it doesn't matter what time they get back from New York, I'm going to certainly come downtown. And
This was all before. This was
that's
before
the
car
end of
accident.
January. That's the end of January.
Yeah.
And then on February 14th, I get home from working 2 flights to New York, and there's a dozen red roses. And I said, oh, I have to fly to Halifax and find out whether this fellow's for real.
Okay.
And we were engaged at Easter time and set our date for December 28th, 1959.
Oh, so this was after the car accident.
Oh, yes.
That all happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
'Cause you see-
When was the car accident?
The car accident was 61 years this past June.
So June. Okay.
June over the July 1st weekend. It was June 28th.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So
then it was.
I had
6
been
months.
in the airlines about a year and a half. And then I was in for another year after the car accident. So
Right.
when the car accident happened, when I decided I would stay in Montreal when I became an airline stewardess and do all, like, fly the East Coast and Boston and Newfoundland and all that. And then I put in a request to transfer out to BC, to Vancouver, to see the West Coast. But then when the accident happened, I canceled the request to go out to BC because I wanted to be able to go home and help my mother and my sister-in-law, who had 3 little children. Because my brother, who was killed, they had a 2.5-year-old, a year and a half, and 6-month-old baby. Yeah.
Can't even imagine.
I know. And, my mother lived with them. And, there was barn work and there was, 3 little children. So I would work a lot of, like, 2 groups of flights together and then maybe get 10 days off. And then I would take the train from Montreal to Irishtown. And I would go home and I would play in the snow, make snowmen with these little children and clean the barn, shovel manure. And I would think, oh, if the passengers could only see me now, because I was so proud of that uniform. Yeah. Yeah. So this sister-in-law, Alec's wife, she died. Her funeral was June 1st in Irishtown.
This year.
Yes. So we went to her funeral. We were talking to her.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were talking to her on a Monday, on her 95th birthday, and she died on Friday.
Wow.
Yeah. So we always said we would go to her funeral.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's. Is that pretty well the way you remember the story?
Yep. Yep. I just, there's a lot of details. There's a lot of pieces that all had to kind of come together for that to all unfold the way
Well, you know what? The sun has set a long time ago, and it's almost bedtime because last night was midnight before we went to bed.
Yes. Well, thanks, you guys. Thanks for indulging me. It's one of my favorite stories. I love that story.
Well, it's
such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
That's how we met.
Yeah.
But
very much from coming from similar backgrounds of same values and same, really the family backgrounds are not that different.
Yeah.
Except they're different because, we didn't have the war to cope with and that.
Yeah.
But it's the same, I guess, family values and yeah.
And spiritual values.
And spiritual values, yeah. And don't you forget that accident had a big impact on me.
Yeah.
because I was like 23, 24 years old. I had the world by the tail. I had the job that I wanted, and I was free as a bird. I thought I was in control, but I tell you, I found out that I was not in control. Because when they got news at home about the accident, they thought that I was in the car also. Because there was a possibility I may go down. But you see, in those days you didn't phone.
Yeah.
You see, there was no, you wrote letters. You never phoned. And only if there was emergencies.
Yeah.
And so when they got the news that there were 6 people in the car accident, well, they thought that I was one of the 6. So when I got home, 2 days later by train, with my brother Terry, my mother hugged me when I arrived, and she says, it could have been worse. And there were 3 coffins in the living room. Yeah, but to her, she thought that she had lost 3 children in the car accident. And when I didn't go down, a little girl, a cousin, was going down to visit her grandparents. So she took that seat in the car. Yeah. Yeah. So it so I, then I completely was cognizant of trying to help my mother and my sister-in-law. I mean, not thinking about myself as much. Because when you're young and you have everything you want, the job you want, you're living a little selfish life, which is normal.
Of course, that's that's
Yeah.
what people in their early 20s do. And
Yeah, exactly.
it's part of the deal.
But it certainly changed my psychic a bit. Yeah.
So then when you got that letter from Grandpa.
Yeah, I thought there's, someone who was practically a stranger. He was an acquaintance, but we had never dated. And when he came along, what I wanted to do was become an airline stewardess. And so it was, and it was also like about 6 months after the accident. So, it wasn't, it was Thanksgiving weekend, so I felt very sad about working Thanksgiving weekend. But because of all the flights I used to change, the group of working hours to be able to get time off. Well, so I was working over Thanksgiving weekend and, feeling very sad for my mother and my sister-in-law. And yeah.
You know what, this looks like a winter scene.
It almost does.
That looks like snow in the trees. and you see the line there of white, that's snow that's on the water, that's frozen.
We're admiring the sky right now.
And when you look at the trees up on top, you can see it looks like scattering of snow up there.
It does.
It looks like a winter scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
That's something. Well, kush.
Kush, kush.
All right.
Kush.
Is that okay with you guys?
Oh yeah, it's
All right.
past my bedtime.
So,
Ooh.
Yeah.
so how many weeks are you going to stay with us, sweetheart?